I want you to picture something. And honestly, you might not even have to picture it because there is a very real chance you are physically doing this right now as you listen.
Yeah, cool.
You know, you are sitting on a crowded train on your way to work, or maybe you're just taking a slow walk around your neighborhood.
No, just sitting at your kitchen table.
Right.
The house is completely quiet.
Exactly. Just staring at a cold cup of coffee. And the world is moving around you. People are going about their days. But inside your head, there is this small, incredibly persistent, very quiet voice.
The whisper.
Right. And it is whispering something highly specific. It's whispering, I should have started sooner.
Wow, yeah. It is like the most universal whisper in the human experience. I mean, I don't think there's a single adult who hasn't heard that exact phrase echoing in the back of their mind at some point.
It's a heavy whisper, isn't it?
Very heavy.
It just carries this profound weight. And that weight is exactly why we are going on a deep dive today. We are unpacking a remarkably practical, completely life-altering framework.
Yeah, developed by Anna and Abel.
Right. The creators behind the YouTube channel, Mr. English Fluent Tutor. Our mission today is to really extract their specific, actionable strategies for mastering a language.
And we're going to lean heavily into their methods for learning English through daily use sentences.
Yes. And diving deep into that somewhat unconventional practice of solo speaking. But the real magic of their approach, the reason we're dedicating so much time to this deep dive, is that their linguistic tools are actually like a Trojan horse.
Oh, absolutely.
They serve as a complete psychological blueprint for changing your life.
Which I know it sounds like an exaggeration.
A bit, yeah.
But when you look at the mechanics of what they are proposing, it is entirely accurate. The principles of acquiring a new language, especially the way Abel and Anna frame the process, map perfectly onto the underlying psychology of personal transformation.
Right, because you cannot rewire your brain for a new language without simultaneously rewiring how you handle fear, and persistence and self-doubt.
Precisely. So we are going to look at the mechanisms of why we get stuck in our own heads.
Yeah.
And exactly how to break out of that paralysis.
No matter your age, your background, or how many times you feel like you have tried and failed in the past.
Exactly. And to really understand why their framework is so necessary, we have to look at the broader context of the world we're living in right now.
Yeah. Set the stage for us.
Well, the year is 2026. The world is completely saturated with information.
Just overflowing.
Right. We have online learning platforms, language apps that use advanced spaced repetition, thousands of podcasts.
Like this one.
Yeah. And digital communities that span the entire globe. I mean, the barrier to entry for learning a new skill or mastering a language has quite literally never been lower in the history of human civilization.
It's all just sitting right there in our pockets. You can pull out a glowing rectangle and access the sum total of human knowledge.
And that is the paradox. Abel and Anna use this brilliant framing of an opportunity being an open door.
An open door, okay.
Yeah, so if your company offers a free training course, that's an open door. A new immersive English community appears online. Open door.
Right.
The modern world has placed thousands of open doors right in front of us. And yet, the core dilemma they identify is that people will walk right up to that open door, stand squarely in front of it, look through to the other side where fluency and opportunity live.
And they just freeze.
They completely seem to walk through.
They just stand at the threshold.
Exactly. They freeze. And then they rationalize the freezing. They say, I'm too old for this. Or other people my age are already so far ahead, there's no point.
Oh, or the classic, I really should have done this 10 years ago. I missed my window.
Yes. So our goal today is to explore the underlying neuroscience and psychology of why our brains trick us into standing still in front of an open door. And, more importantly, the specific daily actions required to finally step through it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because Abel shares a personal story in their framework that gets very real very fast.
It really does.
He describes a scenario that I think is painfully relatable for anyone listening. He talks about reaching his 40s. He had all these ambitions when he was younger. He wanted to speak English with absolute fluency.
Right.
He wanted to travel the world without a translator, maybe pivot into a career he actually loved. But as we all know, life just has a tendency to happen.
Responsibilities pile up.
Bills need to be paid. Energy levels drop. And then one day he has this moment. He looks in the mirror. He realizes he is in his 40s, and he thinks the people who are successful at this started when they were 20.
The window closed.
Yeah. It is too late for you.
That moment in front of the mirror is profound. It represents the exact second a person accepts defeat. And it's not based on a lack of ability, but based entirely on an arbitrary, self-imposed timeline.
And Anna and Abel give a very specific name to the feeling he was experiencing in that moment. They call it regret.
Regret.
Now, we all know what regret means superficially, right? Feeling sad about something you didn't do or something you did wrong in the past. But it's their description of the sensation of regret that completely shifted my perspective.
How do they describe it?
They describe it as walking around every single day carrying a massive, heavy bag.
Oh, wow. So it ceases to be just an emotion and becomes like a physical cognitive burden.
Exactly. I was thinking about this imagery, and it feels like trying to run a marathon while dragging a suitcase completely full of concrete blocks behind you.
That sounds exhausting.
Right. Or imagine you were trying to drive a car down a complex, winding highway. But instead of looking out the windshield to see where you were going, you are exclusively staring into the rearview mirror.
Fixated on the past.
Yeah, you were so intensely fixated on the miles you have already driven and the turns you missed 10 miles back that you literally cannot see the open road right in front of you.
You can't see the open doors.
Because your cognitive focus is locked on a past that no longer exists.
What's fascinating here is the underlying psychology of why we do this. I mean,
Yeah.
why do we stare at the rearview mirror? Why do we voluntarily drag the heavy bag?
That's a great question.
Abel and Anna touch on something that psychologists have studied for decades. Regret keeps you looking backward, and subconsciously, the human brain actually prefers looking backward.
Wait, really? I have always thought of regret as a form of self-punishment. You're saying it's actually self-soothing. That sounds entirely counterintuitive. Why would the brain prefer a negative emotion?
It is a perverse kind of comfort. We certainly don't like the pain of regret. But our brains deeply crave the safety of the past.
Safety.
Yeah, think about the nature of the past. No matter how full of mistakes, failures, or missed opportunities it is, it possesses one incredibly comforting quality. It is completely safe because it cannot be changed.
Oh, it's locked in.
It is locked in amber. And because it cannot be changed, it requires absolutely zero metabolic or psychological effort from you today.
Oh, wow. So you don't have to burn any energy trying to fix it because it's unfixable.
Precisely. If you're focused on the past, you don't have to take a risk right now. You don't have to be vulnerable. You don't have to try a new language and sound foolish.
You can just sit safely in your chair and feel sad about the fact that you didn't learn it 10 years ago.
Regret is essentially a defense mechanism. It protects you from the terrifying reality of the present moment. Abel and Anna contrast the unchangeable past with the concept of the future. They describe the future as a clean white page. And the listener, you are holding the pen.
A clean white page. I mean, that is a beautiful image, but when you frame it like that, it is also deeply intimidating.
It is terrifying. Holding that pen demands action. If the page is blank, it means you have to write the first word. It means you are entirely responsible for what happens next.
Right.
Staring at the past is a highly effective way to avoid the responsibility of writing the next sentence.
So if you are listening to this right now, we really want you to analyze your own thought patterns, identify your own heavy bag. What is the specific regret you are dragging around?
Yeah, what is it?
Are you maybe using your past missed opportunities, the fact that you didn't take English classes in university or that you didn't start practicing speaking 5 years ago? Are you using that regret as a convenient excuse?
Or a shield.
Is it a shield to avoid the vulnerability of being a total beginner today? Because as long as you tell yourself the story that it's too late, you never actually have to do the uncomfortable work of starting.
That is the ultimate trap of the human ego. The regret becomes a protective barrier against the discomfort of trying and potentially failing again.
Which perfectly sets up what I think is the most mind-bending paradigm shift in Abel and Anna's framework. They highlight this massive foundational difference between two phrases that linguistically sound almost identical in English.
Ah, the linguistic flip.
Yeah.
It is brilliant in its simplicity, but the psychological implications are huge.
Let's break it down. They look at the phrase one day versus the phrase day one.
Right.
They say one day sounds like this. One day I will learn English. One day I will finally start speaking to native speakers. One day I will apply for that international job.
Yeah, we've all said that.
They define one day as a dream without a date. It is a concept that relies entirely on a perfect, completely imaginary future where all of your life conditions are magically met.
It is the ultimate procrastination tool, precisely because It disguises itself as a positive intention.
Oh, that's so true.
When you say one day, you aren't admitting defeat. You aren't saying, I will never learn this language.
Right.
You are telling yourself, I will absolutely do it eventually when the stars align.
Right.
It protects your self-image while allowing you to do absolutely nothing.
Exactly, but then they contrast it with day one. Day one means today. It means right now, this very second, exactly where you are sitting, with whatever inadequate, messy tools you currently have in your hands.
Today is day one.
Today is day one of my English journey. Today is day one of me opening my mouth and practicing.
One day is a passive fantasy. Day one is an active, physical reality.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. I want to push back on this a little bit, because as I was absorbing their framework, the pragmatic part of my brain started sounding alarms. Let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Please do. Let's stress test the idea.
Isn't waiting for the perfect moment actually just smart strategic planning?
No.
I mean, if I genuinely want to master a complex language like English, shouldn't I wait until I have a proper study schedule mapped out? Shouldn't I wait until I have saved enough money to buy the best immersive software?
I see where we go.
Or until my chaotic work project finishes next month so I have a clear, uninterrupted 2 hours every evening to concentrate? Isn't one day just a logical way of ensuring I don't set myself up for immediate failure?
I completely understand that instinct. It sounds incredibly logical, which is exactly why it is such a dangerous, pervasive lie we tell ourselves.
A lie.
Abel and Anna completely dismantle the perfect moment myth. They state clearly, the perfect moment does not exist. It is a fictional narrative constructed by your ego so that you do not have to be brave.
So you're saying that waiting for my schedule to clear up isn't time management, it's just a lack of bravery. That is a tough pill to swallow.
It is tough, but look at the psychology behind it. Think about what day one actually feels like in the human body. Abel and Anna don't sugarcoat the experience. They say day one is inherently uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It feels small, it feels chaotic, uncertain, and most importantly, it feels embarrassing.
Embarrassing. I was struck by that word. It is a very specific, visceral word to use for the process of learning.
But it is the most accurate word. Think about the mechanics of speaking a new language. When you are a beginner, you don't feel confident.
Yeah.
You make constant errors. Your accent is thick. You forget basic
I
vocabulary.
feel like a kid again.
Exactly. You sound, to your own ears, foolish. Your brain vehemently hates that feeling of incompetence. Your ego interprets that embarrassment as a social threat.
Wow.
So your brain steps in and says, stop. Wait until you are ready. Wait until you have the perfect textbook. Wait until you have a free weekend. But what your brain is actually communicating is, wait until you can do this perfectly without feeling the pain of embarrassment.
And since the law of the universe is that you will never, ever be able to learn a new complex skill without feeling deeply embarrassed and clumsy at first, that magical one day literally never arrives. You are waiting for a condition that is impossible to meet.
Precisely. They argue that the illusion of the perfect moment is the absolute enemy of progress. Progress requires moving forward, stepping into the unknown.
Yeah.
To achieve that progress, you have to completely abandon the warm comfort of someday. You have to embrace the total discomfort, the messiness, and the friction of day one.
Yeah.
You have to consciously choose to look a little foolish today.
Okay, let's say a listener is tracking with us. They hear this and they buy into the philosophy. They say, all right, I'm throwing away the grand perfect plan. Today is day one.
Awesome.
I'm going to embrace the embarrassment and the mess. That is a massive psychological hurdle to clear. But clearing it immediately brings up the next major roadblock. If day one is all about starting small today, right now, yes.
How on earth do we prevent ourselves from completely burning out on day 2 or day 3?
Yes. The momentum problem. The graveyard of good intentions.
Right, because I think everyone listening has had a spectacular day one at some point. You wake up early, you feel super motivated, you download 3 language apps, you study for 2 hours.
I mean,
And then by day 4, the motivation evaporates, the friction feels too high, and you are right back to your old habits. How do Abel and Anna solve for the drop-off?
they solve it with a very specific, almost ruthless mathematical approach to persistence. They address what they call the myth of binge learning.
Binge learning. Okay.
They define persistence not as some heroic act of willpower, but as simply continuing to execute an action even when it is difficult, even when the initial excitement has faded, and especially when you feel like giving up.
Okay.
And then they drop this stark mathematical reality. They ask you to imagine a person who decides to learn just 5 new English words every single day.
Just 5. just 5 words. It sounds almost laughably small. But if they execute that tiny action every day, even when they're exhausted from work, in 1 year, that equals 1,825 new words.
Wow.
Let's contextualize that number. Over 1,800 words. In the vast majority of global languages, a working, functional vocabulary for daily fluency, enough to navigate a city, hold a conversation, or express basic needs, is often around 2,000 to 3,000 words.
So in a single year, through a daily task that takes perhaps 10 minutes, you are building a massive functional linguistic foundation.
The compounding effect is staggering. But then they contrast this daily micro-habit with how most people actually try to tackle language learning.
Yeah, how do they do it?
They say the most common mistake is planning a massive study binge. A person will think, I'm too busy during the week, so I'm going to sit down and study English grammar and vocabulary for 4 straight hours this Saturday.
The binge learning trap. It relies on massive spikes of motivation rather than systematic consistency.
Right.
I was reading their breakdown of this, and an analogy instantly popped into my head. Planning a 4-hour study binge on a Saturday is the exact equivalent of saying, I am too busy to eat well during the week, so I am just going to eat an entire week's worth of broccoli and grilled chicken in one single massive sitting on Saturday afternoon.
Oh, that sounds physically agonizing. Your body would reject it.
It would. It doesn't make you healthier. It just gives you severe indigestion, makes you feel bloated, and leaves you exhausted. Your digestive system simply cannot process that volume of nutrients at once.
That's a perfect analogy.
And Anna and Abel argue that the exact same thing happens with cognitive processing and binge studying. Saturday arrives. You are drained from the work week. Or a friend calls and wants to get lunch.
You don't do the 4 hours.
Nope. And then what is the immediate psychological result?
The guilt sets in. The heavy bag of regret gets another brick added to it.
Massive guilt. You feel terrible about yourself. You feel like a failure. So what do? You decide to wait for the next perfect, unbroken block of time to make up for the failure.
Weeks pass.
Months pass, and absolutely zero learning happens.
This dynamic is exactly why their framework leans entirely into the concept of small wins. They explicitly argue that small, consistent wins are infinitely more powerful than grand, sweeping plans.
Let's get granular here. What exactly constitutes a small win in their system? Because when people think of learning English, they picture writing essays or reading Shakespeare.
A small win is designed to be almost frictionless. They give excellent examples. Listening to one single 5-minute English podcast while you make your coffee.
Okay.
Reading one short news article. Learning those 5 vocabulary words. These actions seem almost too easy to matter, right?
Yeah, they do.
But the underlying mechanism here isn't just about the rote accumulation of vocabulary. It is about fundamentally altering your psychology and leveraging neuroscience. These small wins are simultaneously building 2 critical infrastructures: self-efficacy and habit-forming momentum.
Unpack the momentum aspect for me. How does learning 5 words actually create a neural pathway?
It comes down to the brain's reward system. When you set a massive goal, I will study for 4 hours, and you fail, your brain registers a loss. It associates language learning with negative emotion.
Right.
But when you set a microscopic goal, I will learn 5 words, and you achieve it, your brain registers a victory. It releases a small hit of dopamine. You feel a brief, quiet sense of pride.
Oh, wow.
You actually start to trust your own promises to yourself again. If you repeat this small victory every single day, you are literally wiring a new neural pathway. Myelin forms around the neurons associated with that behavior, making the signal travel faster.
That is fascinating.
Abel and Anna compare the end state of this process to brushing your teeth.
It's the perfect behavioral benchmark.
It is, because it perfectly illustrates the holy grail of learning: automaticity. Think about your morning routine. Do you wake up, stare at the ceiling, and have a fierce, agonizing internal debate about whether or not you have the motivation to brush your teeth today?
No.
Do you wait until you feel inspired to use toothpaste?
Definitely not. I just stumble into the bathroom half asleep and do it. It's an automatic physical reflex.
Exactly. The brain has outsourced the action from the prefrontal cortex, which handles conscious decision-making and willpower, to the basal ganglia, which handles automatic routines.
Oh, that makes sense.
Once a habit is strong, you don't even have to think about it. If you spend just 15 minutes listening to an English podcast every single morning after a month or 2, it will actually feel psychologically uncomfortable not to listen to it.
Wow. Your brain expects it.
Your brain will anticipate the routine. That is the true, hidden power of the daily 5-word goal. It bypasses the need for massive reserves of willpower and transforms the learning process into a daily reflex.
I see. You are essentially tricking your brain's energy conservation system by making the hurdle so incredibly low that you can't possibly trip over it.
Exactly.
But this leads us to a very practical environmental roadblock that their framework addresses head on. To make these daily 5 words and small listening habits actually stick, you need an environment that triggers and supports them. And what if you are a listener right now who lives in a place where absolutely no one speaks the language you are trying to learn?
Ah, the isolation factor. Historically, this has been a massive, often insurmountable hurdle for language learners.
It is a huge issue. Abel shares a very vulnerable story about this exact problem. He talks about finally getting serious about his English journey, making the decision that today is day one.
Yeah.
But he lived in a small, remote town. Almost nobody spoke English. There were no language academies nearby, no expatriate communities, no conversation groups. They used the word isolated, defining it as feeling entirely alone, separated from the people or resources that could help facilitate your growth.
And if we look back even 20 or 30 years, that physical isolation would have been a near fatal blow to acquiring fluency. If you couldn't access native speakers to model the language, your progress was severely capped by textbooks.
But the breakthrough they share is so empowering because of the era we live in. Abel realizes that in the year 2026, your physical environment is only half of the equation.
Right.
Yes, your physical environment might be a small village in the mountains or a quiet apartment in a city where you live entirely alone. But you have complete, 100% free, autonomous control over your digital environment.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is a profound philosophical shift in how we understand our surroundings. We have to recognize that we no longer just inhabit physical space. We inhabit digital space just as much, and for many people, significantly more. Your phone is a physical location your brain visits for hours every day.
And the framework gives incredibly specific, immediate actions you can take right now to re-engineer that digital space.
What do they suggest?
They suggest going into your smartphone settings and changing the operating language entirely to English. Curating your algorithms by deliberately following English-speaking YouTube channels and creators. Subscribing to English podcasts. Joining online Discord servers or communities where people practice typing and speaking together.
What's truly fascinating here is the psychological shift that these digital alterations trigger in the brain. They discuss the critical process of the language transitioning from foreign to familiar.
Let's drill down into that word, familiar. Because when Abel first changed his phone's operating system to English, he admits it was incredibly confusing and frustrating.
Of course it was. He introduced massive friction into a space his brain expected to be easy. It is a disruption of a deeply ingrained habit.
But he notes that by leaving it in English day after day, he was forced to interact with the language in a functional way. He started seeing English words embedded in real-world context.
Right.
He learned what the word settings meant, not by memorizing a flashcard, but because he physically had to tap the word settings to change his screen brightness. He learned what notifications meant because the word was constantly attached to the alerts popping up on his screen.
This is the neuroscience of microexposures in action. He wasn't sitting at a desk with a grammar textbook. He was physically interacting with the vocabulary to achieve an immediate, necessary goal in his daily life.
Wow, yeah.
The human brain learns and retains information incredibly fast when that information is tied to immediate utility and survival, even if survival just means navigating your smartphone.
And Anna and Abel emphasize that this accumulation of micro-exposures is how real, lasting fluency actually takes root. We have this Hollywood idea that fluency arrives in one dramatic, magical moment where the clouds part and suddenly you understand every lyric of an English song.
Yeah, that's a total myth.
It doesn't happen like that. It is the slow, quiet, almost imperceptible accumulation of thousands of these tiny interactions. Every time you read a notification, every time you navigate an app interface, you are building familiarity.
And familiar is the crucial state you're trying to achieve. When something is foreign, the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, is slightly elevated.
Right.
Processing foreign input takes immense cognitive energy. It feels exhausting.
Right.
When something is familiar, it feels known, it feels safe. It does not trigger a stress response anymore. You don't have to pause and translate the word settings in your head. You just understand the concept directly.
So you're retraining your brain.
By aggressively engineering your digital environment, you are essentially forcing your brain's pattern recognition software to accept English as a normal, safe, default, part of its daily reality.
Okay, so we've hacked our digital environment. We have immersed our phones and our algorithms in the language, but reading notifications and listening to podcasts is ultimately a passive activity.
It is. You are absorbing.
Exactly. To truly achieve fluency, especially the kind of fluency that Anna and Abel focus on in this specific framework, you have to transition to production. You have to practice speaking. And this brings us to what is arguably the most core, actionable, and perhaps the most unusual piece of advice in their entire system.
Oh, yes. The concept of the audience of one.
Yes. Their framework deeply prioritizes speaking practice through the mastery of what they call daily use sentences. And their absolute strongest advocacy, the cornerstone of their speaking strategy, is that you need to start talking to yourself out loud in empty rooms.
It is a phenomenal, highly effective strategy that is backed by linguistics, but it is one that people fiercely resist.
The specific examples they provide in the framework are wild, but when you think about it, incredibly practical.
There are some examples.
They advise that when you are performing mundane tasks, like cooking dinner, you should physically narrate your actions out loud in English. I am cutting the vegetables, I am turning on the stove, I am adding oil to the pan, the food smells good.
I love that.
Or if you are taking a walk outside, you actively describe your physical environment to yourself. There are many tall trees here. The sky is very blue today. I can hear a car driving past.
They are essentially asking the learner to become a live, real-time sports broadcaster of their own completely mundane life.
Right. And look, I have to push back here just a little bit on behalf of the listener, because I can vividly imagine someone hearing this strategy and thinking, if I walk around my kitchen talking to myself about adding oil to a frying pan, or if I stand in front of a mirror narrating my morning routine, I am going to feel completely insane.
Yeah, I totally get that.
It sounds so intensely self-conscious. Doesn't this bizarre self-narration just radically increase that feeling of embarrassment we identified earlier as the enemy of progress?
I completely validate that reaction. It feels strange, artificial, and potentially awkward. But let me defend this practice by combining Abel and Anna's logic with the actual mechanics of language acquisition in the human brain.
Okay, lay on me.
This practice of talking out loud to an empty room is the crucial missing bridge between passive listening, which is just receiving data, and active real-world fluency.
How exactly does talking to your frying pan build that bridge? What is happening neurologically?
When you are only listening to a podcast or reading a text, your brain is in a receptive state. The linguistic pathways are functioning as a one-way street into your brain.
Right.
But when you are forced to generate speech, your brain has to shift into a completely different, highly complex operational mode. It has to instantly retrieve vocabulary from memory, apply grammatical structures, and send signals to your motor cortex to physically coordinate your mouth, tongue, and vocal cords to produce specific sounds.
That's a lot of processing.
It is. Abel and Anna refer to this state as thinking in English.
Because the physical action is happening so fast that you don't have the luxury of time to translate the thought from your native language first.
Exactly. The translation step is the bottleneck of fluency. When you are standing at the counter chopping vegetables, the physical action is occurring in real time. If you demand that your brain narrate that action as it happens, you are forcing the brain to wire the physical sensory experience directly to the English vocabulary, bypassing your native language entirely.
That makes perfect sense. But why do they insist on these incredibly basic daily use sentences? Why just, I am cutting the vegetables? If I'm trying to become fluent, shouldn't I be trying to express complex thoughts or have deep philosophical debates with myself in the mirror?
Absolutely not. And the reason comes down to cognitive load. Daily use sentences are the foundational building blocks of all communication. They represent the highest frequency grammatical structures in the language.
Okay, that makes sense.
By forcing yourself to master these simple structures in a low-stakes environment, an audience of one, where no native speaker is judging your accent, where no teacher is correcting your grammar, you are building what linguists call automaticity.
You're removing the pressure.
Yes, you are bypassing the massive, paralyzing anxiety of trying to perform for a real person. You are training your vocal cords and your cognitive retrieval systems in a completely safe sandbox.
So the goal is that when you finally do step into a real conversation with a native speaker, the underlying architecture of the language is already deeply ingrained as muscle memory.
Precisely. You don't freeze up in a panic trying to remember how to conjugate a basic verb or how to say, I'm doing something, because you have already physically spoken that exact grammatical structure to yourself in your kitchen 300 times.
Oh, wow.
Your brain considers it a solved problem, which frees up your cognitive energy to focus on the complex topic of the actual conversation.
I absolutely love the mechanics of that. So let's issue a direct challenge to the listener right now. We challenge you to try this framework immediately after this deep dive ends.
Or better yet, right now as you are listening.
Describe your current physical reality out loud. Describe your commute. Describe the room you are sitting in. Use the simplest daily use sentences you can muster. I am sitting on a bus. The sky outside the window is cloudy. I am holding my phone in my right hand.
Just try it once.
Feel how it violently forces your brain to switch gears from passive absorption to active generation.
It is the ultimate expression of a day one action. It requires zero equipment and immediate execution.
It is. But if we're being completely honest, to execute this daily practice, to actually find the time to talk to yourself in the kitchen and learn those 5 daily words, we have to confront the monster in the room. The universal excuse. Time.
Time.
Everyone, everywhere, says they simply do not have the time to learn a language. And Abel and Anna's framework addresses this directly by dissecting the economics of our attention, specifically focusing on a very modern, very destructive behavioral pattern.
Breaking the scrolling pattern. This is where the framework intersects with modern digital hygiene.
Yes. They define a pattern broadly as an action you repeat regularly, a deeply ingrained part of your daily routine. And they identify scrolling, the act of moving aimlessly, zombie-like, through social media feeds on your phone without any specific goal or purpose, as the single most common, time-consuming, unhelpful pattern in the modern world.
And they apply some truly brutal, unarguable mathematics to this specific habit.
The math is terrifying when you see it laid out. Abel admits in the material that he used to be a chronic scroller, easily losing 2 to 3 hours a day staring at social media.
That's so common.
And he does the basic calculation for the audience. 2 hours a day multiplied by 7 days a week is 14 hours a week. If you project that over a single year, that is nearly 700 hours.
700 hours of conscious attention.
So what does this all mean? When you hear a number like 700 hours, you have to ask, what is the staggering lost potential of that time? Abel and Anna spell it out. With 700 concentrated hours, you could read dozens of full-length books in English.
Yeah.
You could consume hundreds of hours of complex educational audio content. You could have thousands of 15-minute conversations with language partners.
To put that in perspective, linguists generally estimate that you could achieve a very high level of functional conversational fluency in almost any language with 700 hours of focused input and deliberate output.
So the time is actually there.
The revelation here is that the time actually exists. The pervasive narrative that I am too busy, I don't have time to learn is mathematically false for the vast majority of the population.
Wow.
The time is there. It is simply being quietly siphoned off and allocated to a pattern that, as they astutely note, often leaves you feeling more anxious, more inadequate, and objectively worse when you finish than when you started.
So how do we stop the bleed? How do we reclaim those 700 hours? The solution they offer is what makes this framework so incredibly realistic. They don't take the purist route. They don't say, you must delete all your apps, throw your smartphone into a river, and move to a monastic cabin in the woods.
Which is excellent advice, because purist extreme deprivation never works long-term. The human brain violently rebels against sudden deprivation. It creates a vacuum, and the brain will do anything to fill a dopamine vacuum.
Right. Instead of deprivation, they focus on a strategy they call small trades. The concept is that you don't even attempt to stop using your phone completely. You simply negotiate a trade with yourself.
Like that. A trade.
You trade 30 minutes of aimless morning scrolling while you lie in bed for 30 minutes of listening to an English podcast. Or you trade watching a random, meaningless 10-minute video right before you fall asleep for opening a vocabulary app and reviewing your daily words.
This is the psychological principle of habit replacement at its finest. If you try to just stop a bad habit using sheer willpower, you are fighting a losing battle against your own neurochemistry.
Yeah, that never works.
But if you replace the action, if you make a conscious trade, you give the brain's habit loop a new, healthier target to latch onto.
But let's be real, scrolling is designed to be frictionless. It's engineered by thousands of smart people to be incredibly easy and addictive. How do you actually convince a tired brain to choose the cognitive effort of a vocabulary app over the infinite, effortless scroll of social media?
By using the exact same engineering against the bad habit. Abel and Anna give a brilliantly simple blueprint. You must engineer the friction in your environment.
Okay, how?
They explain that the human brain is fundamentally lazy. It loves energy-saving habits. It prefers to repeat automated patterns so it doesn't have to burn calories making conscious decisions. So the trick to habit replacement is to deliberately make the good habit physically easier to execute than the bad habit.
How do you practically do that on a device designed for distraction?
You manipulate the user interface of your own life. They advise putting the language learning app on the very front screen of your phone, right in the exact spot where your thumb naturally falls when you unlock it.
Smart.
Conversely, you take all your social media apps and bury them inside a folder on the third or fourth page of your home screen, so you have to physically swipe, search, and tap multiple times to access them.
Oh, that adds so much friction.
Exactly. You put your physical English notebook and a pen directly on top of your pillow in the morning, so you literally have to move them to go to sleep at night. You are manipulating the physical and digital geography of your environment so that the path of absolute least resistance leads directly to learning, not to scrolling.
You are hacking your own laziness. You are making the right choice, the lazy choice.
Exactly. And executing these small trades, manipulating that friction day after day, week after week, inevitably leads to tangible markers and progress. Which brings us to a vital concept in their framework that helps sustain this momentum over the long haul. Milestone.
Milestones. I really appreciate how they define this term. They trace it back to its historical context. Literal stones placed on the side of a long road to mark every mile, providing a weary traveler with proof of how far they have come.
That's a great visual.
In the context of this linguistic journey, a milestone is a specific, recognizable moment when you can pause, look back at the road, and say, wow, I have actually covered a massive amount of ground.
And what makes their framework so effective is that they provide very tangible, real-world examples of what these milestones look like in the messy process of language learning. They aren't vague concepts like feeling better about grammar.
Yes, they are highly specific. They say your very first milestone might just be reaching the end of this exact deep dive without having to pause and translate a concept in your head.
Oh, that's a huge one.
Your second milestone might be that terrifying first time you utter a daily use sentence to a real native speaker, and they simply nod and respond because they understood you perfectly. Or it might be sitting down to watch an English movie and realizing you just laughed at a joke without reading the subtitles.
These markers are absolutely crucial because, as Abel points out, the journey to complete fluency is incredibly long. It can feel like crossing an ocean.
Yeah.
Every milestone acts as a psychological fuel stop. They provide the dopamine and the tangible proof of concept required to maintain persistence when the initial excitement fades.
To really make the listener visceralize the power of hitting these milestones, the framework walks through a guided visualization exercise. They call it the future self exercise. And I want to spend some time on this because reading through it gave me literal chills.
It's a very powerful cognitive tool, often used in behavioral therapy, to align present actions with long-term identity.
They ask you to close your eyes and imagine that it is exactly 1 year from today. 12 full months have passed. And I want the listener to try this right now. Imagine that for every single day of that year, you successfully executed the small trades. You did the 15 minutes of morning listening, you learned the 5 words a day, you narrated your cooking to an audience of 1 in your kitchen.
You allow the compounding effect of microscopic actions to do its work.
Exactly. And in this visualization, your 1-year-old or future self is at a social event or a business meeting, and you meet someone new. They ask you a question about yourself, and you naturally open your mouth and answer them in English. The framework describes it so beautifully. The words come. Not perfectly, maybe. You might search for a word. But they come.
That's beautiful.
The other person completely understands you. A real connection is made. And then Abel and Anna pinpoint the exact overwhelming emotion you will experience in that moment. You feel a profound, deep-seated sense of pride.
And that feeling of pride is the ultimate psychological reward. It outweighs the comfort of the infinite scroll 10 to 1. What I love about this visualization is the philosophical point they make. Your future self is not some magical stranger.
Right.
Your future self is not a fantasy character. Your future self is simply your present self, armed with more practice, more accumulated micro-exposures, and the confidence born of discipline. The only thing separating you right now from that proud, fluent version of yourself is time, and the daily choice to use that time well.
And they don't just leave it as an abstract visualization. They ground it in hard reality by sharing Abel's actual documented timeline. This isn't just motivational theory. This is his lived experience.
What was his timeline like?
He started incredibly small, 5 words a day, talking to the mirror, hacking his phone settings. He notes that after 3 months of this, the language stopped feeling hostile. It started to feel familiar. He even experienced a major milestone. He started to occasionally dream in English.
I want to highlight how massive that is. Dreaming in a second language is a major neurological milestone. It signifies that the brain has internalized the linguistic patterns so deeply that it has begun processing them subconsciously during REM sleep. The language has bypassed the conscious effort of translation and embedded itself in the brain's deep architecture.
And then the ultimate milestone. After 6 months of the small trades and the daily use sentences, he logged onto a platform and had his very first real 20-minute live conversation with a native speaker from another country. He is completely honest about the experience. He admits his heart was pounding. He made grammatical mistakes. He occasionally forgot a word. But the core objective was achieved. He communicated, he expressed his thoughts, and the other person understood.
That's the whole point.
And he describes the moment after he ended the call. He sat quietly in his room, the adrenaline fading, and he thought to himself, Abel, you looked in the mirror and thought it was too late. You thought your window was closed. But look at you now.
That exact moment, that quiet realization in the empty room, is what their framework defines as true transformation.
Transformation. They are very careful to define this. They say transformation is not just learning a new skill or making a small adjustment to your routine. It is a deep, fundamental change in the core of who you are and how you interact with the world.
Right.
They compare it to a caterpillar dissolving to become a butterfly, or the stark shift from a dead winter to a blooming spring. But the most vital part of their definition is how they argue this transformation actually occurs.
And this raises an important question about our cultural expectations, doesn't it? We are conditioned by movies and social media to think of personal transformation as a cinematic montage. We expect a sudden, dramatic breakthrough, accompanied by swelling orchestral music, where suddenly we are a different person. But how does Abel's lived experience actually describe the mechanics of change?
He says transformation absolutely does not happen in one dramatic lightning strike moment. It happens entirely in the quiet, completely invisible, mundane moments of your Tuesday afternoon.
Yes.
The exact second you pause, feel the urge to scroll, and consciously choose to open a podcast instead. The exact moment you are walking alone feeling foolish, but you choose to say one daily used sentence out loud instead of remaining silent. The moment you are tired before bed, but you choose to write down one vocabulary word instead of forgetting it. Those microscopic, entirely invisible choices, repeated over time, are the literal seeds that grow into a completely different future identity.
It is a radically democratic view of personal change. You don't need immense wealth, you don't need to be in your 20s, and you don't need a genetic predisposition for languages to make those quiet choices. You just need intention and the willingness to endure a little bit of friction.
Which brings us to the final incredibly beautiful examples they provide regarding the concept of potential. Because the entire premise of Abel's crisis at the beginning of the framework, that moment staring in the mirror, was the belief, I am in my 40s, my prime is over, my potential is gone.
And that's just a tragic way to view life.
Abel and Anna completely shatter this myth of expiring potential. They bring up real-world examples to prove it. They talk about a 73-year-old woman who had never picked up a brush, decided to learn to paint, and became a highly respected, well-known artist in her 80s.
Wow.
They talk about a 60-year-old man who had a lifelong terror of the water, didn't even know how to float, decided to learn how to swim, and successfully swam across a massive lake for his 65th birthday.
If we look deeply at what these specific examples represent, they are fundamentally redefining how our culture views aging and capability. The framework states explicitly, and I think this is the most powerful sentence in the entire system, your potential does not expire like food in a refrigerator.
Oh, that line hit me hard. It is so evocative.
It's the perfect analogy because it exposes the flaw in our thinking. We treat human potential like a carton of milk with a printed expiration date. But potential isn't a physical resource that gets used up, oxidizes, or goes bad over time. It is a persistent state of being.
Right.
To drive this point home, the creators use a wonderful literary analogy to reframe the listener's perspective on their own life timeline. They speak directly to the learner and say, you are not in the final chapter of your story.
Right. They point out that you might just be starting a brand new chapter. And if you think about any great novel, the most important transformative chapters in a book are almost never the ones at the very beginning. First chapters are just setup.
Setup, exactly.
The most critical chapters are in the middle. Middle of the book is when the character has been tested, when they have experienced severe difficulty, when they have failed, learned from their agonizing mistakes, and gathered the tools they need to finally do something truly meaningful.
This literary framing completely flips the narrative of regret that we discussed in the very first section. It resolves the problem of the heavy bag.
How exactly does it resolve it? Break that down for me.
Think back to the beginning of our discussion. The heavy bag of regret was full of past mistakes, missed opportunities, and wasted time. It was a burden dragging you down, keeping your eyes on the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
But this literary analogy brilliantly reframes those exact same past experiences. The framework argues that the mistakes you made in your 20s, the time you feel you squandered, the chances you were too afraid to take, those events are not empirical evidence that your life story is a failure. They are your backstory. They are the essential plot points that have shaped you, tempered you, and made you wiser.
They give you a profound depth, a resilience, and a perspective that a fresh-faced 20-year-old simply hasn't had the time to acquire yet.
Precisely. Wisdom is not intelligence. Wisdom is the deep, structural understanding of life that only comes from surviving experience. You know things about yourself now that you absolutely did not know at 20. You have survived heartbreaks, career shifts, and failures.
Yeah.
And Abel and Anna argue that this hard-won wisdom, when you finally combine it with the specific daily actions of their framework, when you finally decide to start your day one, becomes an incredibly powerful, unstoppable combination. Your past is no longer a heavy bag of bricks you're dragging behind you. It becomes the solid foundation you are standing on to reach higher.
I think that is the perfect culmination of their philosophy. So as we bring this deep dive to a close, Abel and Anna leave the listener with a very specific, undeniable, immediate action step. They strip away all the theory and ask a simple question. What is your exact next step after this audio ends? After you pull your headphones out or close your laptop, what physical action will you take in the real world?
And true to their philosophy of frictionless micro-habits, their request is remarkably, almost surprisingly small.
It is so small you have no excuse not to do it. They say, do one physical thing, just one. Grab a physical piece of paper and a pen, or if you must, open the Notes app on your phone and type out 3 words. Today is day 1. That is the entire assignment for today.
It is a physical manifestation of a psychological decision.
Yeah.
You are pulling the intention out of your head and making it real in the physical world.
Yes. And then they outline tomorrow. Tomorrow, you do one small thing in English, just one. You learn 5 vocabulary words while you drink your coffee. Or you change your phone's operating system to English. Or you stand in your kitchen, look at an audience of 1 and say one single daily use sentence out loud.
Just one.
And the day after that, you do one more small thing. You build the chain. You keep going, especially, and most importantly, on the days your brain begs you to stop. Because as they summarize so perfectly, the people who actually change their lives, who actually achieve fluency and walk through those open doors, aren't the people with the highest IQs or the youngest brains. They are simply the ones who persist.
The ones who recognize the friction, accept the embarrassment, and simply refuse to give up.
I want to end our deep dive by reading the final, deeply personal anecdote that Abel shares at the very end of their framework, because it serves as the ultimate anchor for everything we have discussed for the last hour.
That's a great story.
He reveals that in his absolute darkest moment of regret, when he was convinced his window had closed forever, a mentor told him something that permanently altered his trajectory. The mentor said, Abel, the fact that you still care about this means it's not over. The moment you stop caring, the moment you feel nothing, is the moment it's really too late. But the fact that you care means you still have fire, and fire means you can still move.
Fire means you can still move. It's a profound realization about the nature of desire and capability.
It really is. And I want to build on that concept for you, the listener, as our final provocative thought to leave you with today. We talked at the very beginning about that heavy feeling of regret, that nagging whisper on the bus or in the quiet kitchen that says, I should have started sooner. We are socially conditioned to interpret that feeling of deep frustration as a purely negative emotional state. We view our frustration over not speaking English yet or not changing our careers yet as empirical proof of our failure.
But what if that interpretation of the emotion is entirely backward? What if the brain is mislabeling the signal?
Exactly. I want you to consider this. What if the intense, sometimes painful frustration you feel right now about not being fluent yet is not a sign of failure at all? What if that frustration is actually the raw physical manifestation of that fire Abel's mentor was talking about?
If you look at the neurochemistry of frustration, it is high energy. Frustration is heat. It is a highly agitated state. You only feel frustrated because you still care deeply, on a visceral level, about the outcome. If the fire were truly out, if your potential was actually gone, you wouldn't feel regret or frustration at all. You would just feel a cold, flat apathy. You would feel absolutely nothing.
Yes. The presence of the pain proves the presence of the potential. So, moving forward, instead of viewing your frustration as a heavy bag of concrete blocks that you are doomed to drag around, or as a logical reason to finally quit, what if you consciously chose to view it as the exact high-octane fuel that guarantees your eventual success? You have the